Hey everybody, welcome to the first video on my team building fundamentals guides. I wanted to really do something a little different with how I talk about team building. So rather than kind of just showcasing and going into depth about specific teams, I want to talk about some of the underlying concepts in a team and how maybe a particular team is built around a particular concept. And so this will be my attempt at that. And starting off, we're going to talk about the concept of balance and control in a team and in the building process of that. My name is Tyler. I often go by @across online, and let's jump into this. Alright, so to get started, let's talk about common themes when we're talking about balance and control in a team building process. First and foremost, we've got to talk about bulk or defensive investment. When you're talking about balance, it's about having a healthy range of bulky Pokemon. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to have all bulky Pokemon, but you have Pokemon that can take hits well, whether it's like naturally through their just natural base stats, or you invest in their defenses and hit points in order to take those hits a lot better, as opposed to investing into the offenses. And teams will vary on how many Pokemon are like this, but typically you want to have a few Pokemon that can tank hits when you're really trying to think about the balance and all that. And then the next thing after that is diverse speed tiers. So what this means is you're not really leaning heavily into just fast Pokemon or slow Pokemon or Pokemon in between. You're trying to have a healthy range to where you can have maybe one Pokemon that's the slowest in the format, and then also the fastest one Pokemon that might be the fastest in the format to kind of sandwich in between everything. And in double battles, this is really important because the move Trick Room is very common on teams. And so having slow Pokemon can help with that. And slower Pokemon generally mean more investment into the defenses also. And so the diverse speed tiers and the bulk part play kind of a role together, in that typically your slower Pokemon will also be bulkier. And with that, on top of speed, you have speed control, which is a incredible and a very important form of control. So the way speed control works is you make your slow Pokemon faster with moves like Tailwind, or you make your slow Pokemon move before faster Pokemon due to the inversing effect of Trick Room. And then you have other moves like Thunder Wave and Icy Wind that put debuffs onto the opposing Pokemon to make them slower, so that your Pokemon that might have been slower are now faster. And this is just a really good way to mitigate some of the diversity in speed tiers, because in order to make sure you have the speed advantage in any given matchup, you want this speed control. Unlike some teams that just have all fast Pokemon, it's not necessarily needed because they'll most likely outspeed everything if they can stop that team's form of speed control, assuming they have it. The next major factor in control especially is support. So things like Fake Out, which is a staple of VGC, you see on a lot of teams. You can take away a whole turn of an opposing Pokemon with the move Fake Out. And so that can buy a turn for your partner Pokemon to use a setup move like Trick Room or Tailwind, or a setup move like Swords Dance or Nasty Plot to boost their damage for later, or common moves might be like Dragon Dance or Quiver Dance. Follow Me and Rage Powder do similar things, that they redirect single target attacks to protect a partner Pokemon from getting hit, and you'll see bulky Pokemon like Indeedee Female and Amoonguss run this. Some other things you can do is inflict status like Sleep through moves like Spore and Sleep Powder. You can burn to reduce the damage of physical attacks using moves like Will-O-Wisp, and then you have moves like Snarl, which lowers special attack. One not listed that's worth mentioning is the move Breaking Swipe, which lowers attack. What's unique about Snarl and Breaking Swipe is that they hit both Pokemon on the opposing side of the field. So those are pretty common damage mitigation or control moves. Another theme of balance and control is maneuverability. And what I mean by this is that because of the bulk you have and the support the support moves, you have the ability for Pokemon to switch out and also switch into attacks due to that bulk. You'll also see moves like Volt Switch, U-Turn, Parting Shot being utilized in order to get a Pokemon out, and that's also where the slow speed can be nice, because you can U-Turn, Volt Switch, or Parting Shot as a slower Pokemon and get a Pokemon into that slot for free without taking any damage. That's a pretty common thing you'll see. And then also on top of switch potential that takes full advantage of defensive type synergy. You'll see these teams have type synergies such as the common Fire, Water, Grass core, where you have a Pokemon such as Amoonguss, Arcanine, and Rotom Wash, who are Fire, Water, Grass types altogether, that can switch into each other's weaknesses very well, such as if a fire move is coming out at Amoonguss, you can switch into Arcanine or Rotom Wash to tank that hit for it, as well as potentially threaten the Pokemon doing the attack. The Fairy Steel Dragon core, another common core that does the same thing. If there's a steel type attack coming into the fairy Pokemon, the dragon type can switch into it a little better, not always resist it, but in the case of like a dragon being weak to fairy, the steel type can switch into it and threaten it. So, and that's the importance of type synergy on a team that likes to be able to switch around and get into better position. It also utilizes multi-role and multifunctional Pokemon, and these are Pokemon that can do different things with different sets, or they can be invested in different ways to do different things, and even have different roles on a team, on that particular team. It's also really good for, as the season progresses, trying to make minor adjustments to a Pokemon without changing the whole Pokemon. Rotom Wash and Arcanine are really good examples of this, because they're two Pokemon that have the ability to be offensively built or more defensive and support built, or kind of a mix of both, especially in the case of Rotom Wash, which you'll tend to see have good attacking moves as well as good support moves, or you can just go full offense and run things like Nasty Plot with a Life Orb and such. Yeah. Now we want to talk about goals and strengths of if it's a team that's like built or more around balance and control. The idea to this is you're looking to defeat all or most matchups and team builds, and that is any team you come against at any point, whether it's in a tournament or on the ladder, you feel like you have the tools necessary to defeat that. And that's a lot of it due to the diversity of things such as defense and speed, as well as just the multifunctionality of the team. You're wanting to be able to take out any team, any Pokemon that comes across your way, which also a facet of that is to create greater room for error. So when you come up against a matchup and you make a mistake, you have certain other aspects that you can lean on to make up for that. You can't have big room for error for every matchup, but you can try and do it for as many matchups as possible. But occasionally you come up against a matchup where you have one Pokemon that you absolutely have to have stick around to win that matchup. Another aspect of balance and control often is what I like to say, slow and steady wins the race. And what I mean by that is you're not really looking to win the game in as few turns as possible, or like at turn one. You're looking to just kind of play out the whatever the current context of the game is, and slowly work your way to a position that you see as how to win the game. So basically, you're not going into the game already deciding how you're going to win it. You're deciding how to win it as the game progresses. So from turn one, and that's not to say you don't have a strategy, but you're looking for the context in which you win the game, as opposed to some teams where you have a set strategy, you're going for that, and that's what you're doing turn one, and if it goes well, great, and if not, you could be in trouble. This doesn't do that. And also with that, it's a very much a read and react style of team building, where you're building a team to be able to react to anything that gets thrown your way. So turn one, something throws you off. If you have good room for error and you do have the tools to beat it, you see what they're doing, get the information, and then you react accordingly. Set up your win condition and play to it, which also makes a team very flexible in that you can play to multiple win conditions, as well as strong switch potential, and that plays into flexibility, because if you get a bad lead matchup, well, you're not just totally screwed right from the get-go. You have planned out Pokemon that can easily switch in to reset the positioning to get back into a more favorable position, and then play it out until you have positioned yourself into your win condition that you have slowly pieced together as the game goes on, or decided which route of multiple routes you could potentially go based on how decisions and plays play out. This also tends to reduce your reliance on RNG. And that's because you're really relying on your ability to assess information and your ability to make those right decisions, or at least those decisions that cover as many possible scenarios as possible moving forward, as opposed to maybe using very high damaging and low accuracy moves that can just take KOs early and finish the game off as fast as possible. Or maybe sometimes certain moves like one-hit KO moves, you can rely on those if you want. Not recommended, but you can. And one of the major factors of this style of build is it's very consistent in best of 3 matches, and that's just because, like, once you have information and you trust your skills a lot and your ability to utilize that information, you can win 2 games after losing the first. This is my preferred style of build, and I have had countless tournament games at regionals in which I get just completely destroyed game 1 rather, and then win out the last 2 games because now I have the information I need on how they're functioning and I react accordingly. And so those are some of the goals and strengths, but not everything's perfect. I'm only talking about this style of building first because it's the one I'm most experienced with and my most comfortable form of building. However, that does come with some challenges, and I am very aware of some of these challenges. So the first one is information disadvantage. Typically, these builds have teams that would be considered boring, and that's because they're often the Pokemon that are very commonly used, and they're commonly used because they're just well balanced, well built Pokemon. And what that means, though, is your opponent will typically have an idea of what you're trying to do or what the Pokemon sets and builds are. A little more difficult with other Pokemon that can go multiple ways, but typically there's at least a somewhat general idea of what's happening, and it's in those best of 1 matches, like on the ladder, where that can really struggle. Someone can just do something you completely unexpect and just blow you back. It's happened to me countless times. So you are at an information disadvantage initially, but that can swing once you gather enough information, especially in a best of 3. There are certain matchups that can be really difficult to prepare for. And these are some overwhelming or obscure matchups, is what I call them. Not to say that they're not matchups that aren't good or anything. They're good matchups, but they can be that's just that. They're very matchup reliant. A couple historical examples is in 2015, the Parish Trap teams are really good against slower, bulkier defensive teams, and Balance Control does tend to emphasize bulk and defense a little more, and so Parish Trap can really take advantage of those. In 2017, the infamous Eevee teams that utilized Eevee's special Z move, Extreme Evo Boost, could get just very overwhelming, way too fast for some of these balanced, bulky teams. They get set up before you can really do anything, or you spread. The idea is you these teams can spread themselves out too thin to where like you maybe have one tech move that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't work against a team like Eevee, and so you kind of can get screwed over that way because of that. Dodonzo Tatsugiri, I think, is a good example of this. Though this is a very strong strategy, there are ways to deal with it, but you typically have to tech it into the team, and sometimes certain versions of like Dodonzo Tatsugiri won't your tech won't work against, while other versions it might. Um, so yeah, the idea is like they can just spread themselves out thin, way too much to where you can't cover some of those more overwhelming or obscure matchups that you might see, but you're not likely to see it often unless you're extremely unlucky, and that's all you run into. One not listed, but kind of under the same idea of the overwhelming obscure matchups. It's really easy to fall behind early with this type of team if you're really heavily built on the balance and control concept. You can fall behind really early, which means you're just always playing from behind, which can be very mentally draining and really difficult because you do have to kind of make things go your way. And sometimes you can just fall behind so far so early that digging out is takes a lot of reliance on RNG, which is what you're trying to not do. So those are some of the challenges that I've experienced playing this style. But now let's just get to some sample teams, and here I'm just going to kind of talk about the Pokemon. I'm not going to get into sets. Those will be in the description below. So anyways, I have two samples from this VGC 23 that I am currently recording in. And we have sample 1, which is the first team I utilized on Terrestrial Tactics. I just have Hariyama here because that would be the obvious replacement for the Paradox Pokemon, Iron Hands. But anyways, you have Tyranitar, Amoonguss, Farigiraf, Goldengo, Hariyama, and Salamence. So this team was built with the idea of balance and control in mind, and this one is leaning more towards slower, bulkier, and more speed control reliant. So this team, I decided I want Trick Room, since it's a slower team, so that's where Farigiraf comes in. And then the other form of speed control I chose is Tailwind, and I ended up with Salamence in the final form of this for typing reasons and type synergy reasons. And then the ways to kind of do the speed control setup to support that was things like Rage Powder with Amoonguss and Fake Out with Hariyama. And also just kind of the natural bulk of some of the Pokemon, specifically Farigiraf, to just take a hit and set up. In terms of damage control, you have Salamence with Intimidate, which also helps it out in setting up Tailwind. The big one, though, is Amoonguss with Rage Powder, Spore, and Clear Smog. Rage Powder being able to direct an attack away from something, so Amoonguss, which is a very bulky Pokemon, can take the hit. You can use Spore to put something to sleep so they lose at least one turn, and then Clear Smog to clear any stat boosts on opposing Pokemon that can just begin to overwhelm your team. And then Farigiraf has the ability Armor Tail, which blocks priority moves, which is incredibly useful when there's a lot of priority being thrown around, whether damaging or status, and that can just directly mitigate damage by negating it completely. And of course, I didn't list it, but you can also go back to talk about Hariyama's Fake Out, which takes away a turn from a Pokemon attacking by flinching it through Fake Out. And then, a balanced team wouldn't be balanced if it didn't also have its big hitters, or what you can call the speed control abusers. So both Tyranitar and Goldengo are designed to operate both in Trick Room against faster teams, or to take advantage of Tailwind against slower teams, or teams that are slightly faster, so they need that little speed boost, in which like Salamence maybe outspeeds them to get the Tailwind up, and now the heavy hitters are outspeeding. And Tyranitar, a staple to hit hard with its rock slides. Also, it's the Terra Rock type to make its rock slides stronger. Same with Goldengo with Make It Rain and Steel Terra type. And so the main idea of this team is that everything can do some damage, but they don't always give up bulk and defensive investment for that damage. The only exception here is Salamence, which has no investment, but everything has primarily bulk investment, but also can still do damage with some naturally high attack stats like Tyranitar and Goldengo. And then this also relies heavily on its defensive investment in order to increase switching potential. So even if I'm switching into neutral attacks, it can take them pretty well just to their natural bulk. And so that's the sample team 1 of a balance and control build to it. Team 2, this is a team that I plan on streaming with, because at the time of recording I have not, but I have been playing around with this team. And this is an example of a more faster and immediate offensive balance and control team. And so it doesn't actually rely on speed control nearly as much, because it has some natural speed, such as Garchomp, Talonflame, and even Goldengo in some cases can be pretty quick. And all 3 of those Pokemon are fully invested in speed to do big damage. However, it doesn't mean that it's not like Hyper Offense or Glass Cannon Pokemon, except for maybe Talonflame, for example. This team also has control in that it relies on, but it has the ability to set up for offensive damage. And some of that setup is Garchomp carrying Swords Dance to boost its damage even more, Goldengo with Nasty Plot to either clear special attack drops from Make It Rain, or to just boost its damage to maybe get a double KO with its spread move. And then the big one is Sylveon, which has a Calm Mind substitute. So one of the ideas of the team is to get the early offense going, to then bring in Sylveon, and while the offensive Pokemon are causing trouble, Sylveon's just sitting there and getting up a Calm Mind or a substitute, and then just spamming that ever so sweet Hyper Voice or Pixelate Hyper Voice button. So great. So, but of course, for all that to work, it needs control. If you want that natural offense to get real crazy, you've got to help set it up. And again, we have Amoonguss here with Spore, Rage Powder, and Clear Smog. Same idea with Spore to like buy a turn for setup or to do free damage, Rage Powder to protect your offensive Pokemon, and then Clear Smog to clear any stat boost on the opposing Pokemon or drops on your own Pokemon in order to mitigate some damage. Rotom Wash also having Will-O-Wisp in order to burn physical attackers, and then Helping Hand to boost the damage and support the more offensive Pokemon that way as well. And then finally you have Talonflame, which is again one of those multi-role Pokemon that can do damage but also supports with Taunt and Tailwind. Tailwind for speed control to make things faster than their faster Pokemon, because Talonflame is usually faster than most Pokemon in the game. Taunt to stop things like Trick Room or other setup moves, basically to stop their sort of control and support. So the idea of this team is to utilize strong offensive Pokemon that also have decent natural bulk, so you can maximize their immediate offensive output and setup potential without worrying too much about taking one hit and going down. You can usually take 1 or 2 hits depending on the Pokemon. And rather than focusing heavily on defensive investment and speed control in order to switch, this team relies on type synergy. In fact, you can see this team actually has both those cores I talked about with Fairy, Steel, Dragon, and Fire, Water, Grass. Since not everything is heavily invested, you can rely on that typing in order to do that. So, such as if there is an electric move coming out against Talonflame, I can switch into Garchomp, though not gonna be as bulky as say Amoonguss, but it can, because of its ground typing, it doesn't take any damage from the electric move. And then you also have now a big fast offensive Pokemon as opposed to a tiny defensive Amoonguss, which depending on the situation, it could be detrimental to have Amoonguss out instead of your offensive Pokemon. So that type synergy is very crucial to this sort of more fast offensive, balanced, and controlled concept. So anyways, that's all I have for you guys. Not exhaustive by any means, but just to kind of start to give you an idea of that idea of trying to make sure you have good balance and have ways to control the game. But just remember those big themes of like flexibility, slow and steady. If those words resonate with you, this could be the concept that you want to lean more into. So yeah, and then finally check out the video description. That's where you'll see the links to see all the details about those two sample teams. So you'll have there'll be pace that you can plug into Pokemon Showdown and start messing around with them there. Be sure to like and subscribe if you are not subscribed and you want to see more of this. It helps to see that people like it, so be sure to like it. And then finally, be sure to suggest any other guides you'd like me to make. I want to start doing more of this, and it helps to get suggestions and to see that people are engaging. And yeah, I just really hope this helps you out and growing as players. And yeah, I am happy to do stuff like this to help anyone improve. So anyways, take it easy, everyone. We'll catch you in the next episode, and hopefully in the next fundamentals to team building guide. Take care.